Oh, hello, Patty. How are you?
Hi, Jeremy. How's it going?
It's great. Having a great day, having a great morning. Loved our catch up session right before this. So excited to have this conversation with you. You have accomplished so much in your career, and our OhHello community is going to learn a lot during this conversation. I have the pleasure of knowing who I'm speaking with. Why don't you tell our audience, who are you? Tell us
Oh
about
gosh.
yourself.
Yeah. That's that's like, just really quickly, I would just characterize myself as a consumer packaged goods veteran that has found their way into retail over the last few years, but at the heart of it, I'm just a consumer nerd. Really just love to understand the consumer and help her with her journey. So,
I respect that. Thank you, Patty Wu. So, Patty, help us understand a little bit about just what defines you as a professional, as an executive. You have an incredibly accomplished career. You've gone through some of the ultimate highs of highs and lows of lows throughout your career, and just a fascinating roller coaster.
yeah, and I guess what I would just say, and what I love about the Oh Hello concept and community around mentorship is mentors have really helped me find my career path, right? If I think about it, my career started kind of very typical, right? I did sales at General Mills, got my MBA because I'm Asian, and my parents were like, you've got to get a graduate degree. And then I did the typical management consulting into brand management. And I've been very lucky because if you ever look me up on LinkedIn, you can start to see I've had a lot of different experiences. I've sat on both sides of the desk in consumer packaged goods, whether it's on the manufacturing brand side or and I've sat on the retailer side. And I just think I've been lucky that along the way, mentors and former bosses have always brought me in to their roles. And I would just encourage everybody, if you have a great boss and as you move on to that next role, make sure you stay connected with that boss. And I would also just say be open, right? I think so much in life, we're told like, hey, this is your track. You have the ability to have free will as you take a look at your career and you just never know how big your career can be unless you go for it.
I love that advice of being open, going for it, and just also paying homage to the bosses, the mentors, the leaders that are making an impact. That's part of the reason of why we're creating both the community and the platform. Help us understand a little bit more about some of the traits or characteristics that those mentors have, the seeds that they planted to help you grow into the executive that you are today, and just being able to make those decisions, make those twists and turns, going from CPG to retail, going from sales to executive management to leading some very large companies. Would love to hear and understand a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, and I would just say like and you and I talked about this before we got onto the podcast is the notion of chemistry, right? And sometimes you have certain bosses where you have great chemistry and I think a couple of things just understanding making great bosses that I've had understand what motivates me and help position the role so that not only do they get the best of me, but they also help me grow. Right. And I would just say, if you're in a situation, always ask, like, what else can I do or what can I learn? And also take a step back and see what your boss is really good at and what superpower do they have that you can start to cultivate within yourself. And then I think the other thing is early on in my career versus later on in my career. Early on in my career, my boss was like always on a pedestal. But as you start to get more experience under your belt, you understand that they're human too, and you build that relationship with them. And I think what I see a lot of people do is that they always neglect to share with their manager, hey, this is what I really want to do in my life, right? And my career changed dramatically when I was open with my manager and also my manager's manager in terms of what I wanted to do. And then as you start to work longer, i.e., as you start to get older, you start to have a lot of, you have a much bigger network. And I think if you let people know what you want to do, mentors, managers will naturally help you achieve that career goal. One of the things, I have always wanted to work overseas. I've always wanted to be an expat. And I just shared that aspiration and I was very open with that aspiration. So when a role opened up, I was the first one sent on the airplane.
I love that, and we talked about your experiences of growing up in the South and in Huntsville, Alabama, and then going to some great schools and living in San Francisco, living in New York, living in Asia. At what point in your career did you realize, huh, I want to explore. I want to travel. I want to experience different cultures. I want to experience different ways that people engage in business, in communications, in life.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, you've mentioned this. I grew up in Alabama, so I think my parents really made sure that we got out and got to see the world early on, and that just instilled a level of kind of like wanderlust in me. But I think professionally, it didn't happen until I went to business school. And I think that exposure to students, peers coming from other countries just really started to pique my interest. And I just, I did an overseas abroad study assignment in Shanghai, and that just really kind of planted the seed of wanting to do something internationally.
Cool. Cool. So when we're talking about bosses and when we're talking about people that we've worked with, let's just call it mentors. When we've talked about different mentors, who are some mentors that have had a profound impact on your career, Patty?
Well, one of them is, and you just met him, Paul Weinwand.
Yeah.
He
Thank
is a
you.
partner at Strategy, and he's been a mentor of mine basically over the last 20 plus years. And what I appreciate about him is through thick or thin, he's always checking in. And I think it's been great because there have been times where I'm like, I think I'm going to explore into this category. He never says no, but he'll ask the questions that will help me make sure that it's aligned to what my values truly are. Because I'll tell you, like, and I'm going through this process right now, looking at different roles. You can get swept up in the romance of like exploring different categories, different industries. But at the end of the day, you have to know what's going to align to your values and how you operate. And I think a mentor who really knows you can ask you those questions to make sure that in the moment it feels really awesome. But as you start to think about being in the job longer, working in that culture, is that going to be a soul sucking situation? And I've had that happen a few times. I had another mentor, and I was choosing between a role, two radically different companies on on the spectrum in terms of high end versus low end or mass. And my boss just said, "Hey, remember, right? Like in the moment, it feels really cool to be romanced by two companies, but at the end of the day, where do you feel like you can be yourself?" And I think that that's a really good question because you want to make sure that you're managing the marathon of your career and your career choices as opposed to in the moment.
Really great sound advice. Going back to some of the guidance that Paul gave you about him never saying no, can you go a little bit deeper? Like, did you mean if you're just looking for guidance from Paul or during a conversation?
I think what's important, and whether you are a mentor or if you are a mentee, it is about making sure that you're asking each other the right questions. And that as a mentor that you're asking the questions, but as a mentee you're being truthful to yourself, right? Because as I mentioned before, you can get swept away into the notion of a role. And if I don't know about you, but sometimes I can put blinders on and just be like, no, that sounds really cool. It must be cool. Right. Whereas a mentor can come in and just make sure to say, like, hey, what did you observe? Right. You know, could you really see yourself there? And just to do that gut check of like, is this aligned to your values and who you are as a person? How much are you going to need to change to fit in? And are you going to be, is it good change for you? Because change is good, but sometimes not all change is good, right? So,
Absolutely. And there's a sense of tribalism in a lot of different companies, and culture is incredibly important, and so often it gets overlooked, and people see a shiny object and then they pivot into that shiny object, and then they soon realize that, it's not as shiny as they thought from looking from the outside.
yeah, the honeymoon phase ends very quickly.
Very
So,
quickly, very
yeah,
quickly,
yeah.
Patty. What excites you about mentorship? What excites you about what we're building?
I think the notion for me personally, it's about paying it forward. I have been super, super lucky. And I have also cultivated the mentoring relationships that I have. And I think that, it's hard, right? Especially there, sometimes you work at places without the mentoring program. And even when you do work in places with a mentoring program, they never prepare you for it. I'm just at least that's my own opinion, right?
No,
And I've
you're
worked at some
dead on.
pretty like I've worked at some pretty great companies where they're just like, "Hey, this is Jane Doe, she's your mentor. Good luck." Right? And on the mentor side, they're not prepared, and as a mentee, you're not prepared. And I've been really lucky that I've fallen into some mentorship relationships like with Paul, and or I've been put into mentoring relationships with people that are seasoned. But I've also been in mentoring relationships where it's a new mentor and I'm a new mentee, and it's awkward. And sometimes the chemistry doesn't work out, and you move on, and that's okay. Gosh, I don't even know if I'm answering your question. What
No,
was the
you are,
question?
Patty. That was perfect.
So
And
yeah,
that's part of the rationale of why we're building the community of having mentors of all different experiences.
yeah,
So the mentees, the O's, can meet with the mentors, the hellos, and see if there's a good fit. And if there's not, it's good to have a variety. It's good to
yeah,
have change. It's good to be able to have different options.
yeah. And it is a lot like dating, right? Like
Speed
who's
dating.
gonna gel, right? So
That's
yeah,
exactly it.
yeah,
Well, as you know, and you had said just something that you're interested in, is just the paying it forward, the giving back, the altruism. And that's part of the reason of why we are building this. So there is altruism in giving back because our platform is integrated into 40 to 50 different charities for now. Down the line, in a post MVP stage, perhaps way more. What are some causes that are near and dear to you, Patty?
yeah. Well, if you guys know me, I'm a pet parent. And so anything that is associated with the ASPCA, or some type of shelter community, if you're in the Bay Area, the Milo Foundation is important, but any sort of pet causes are incredibly important. And then I think the second piece is also education. My dad was in research and academia, and I really do feel like, I am grateful for the educational experience that I have had and how it opens up the world to you. So those
Amazing.
are the two big causes for me.
Amazing, Patty. Any other parting words of wisdom or advice just to those watching, to those listening?
Yeah, I would just say take the first step and reach out, because I think, at the end of the day, mentoring is in your hands. And I was late to the game in terms of asking for mentorship. People are, I think, naturally wired to help, and I think a lot of us out there see asking for help as a sign of weakness, or you're not able to do something. And I think it's completely counter, like, you should just take that first step and go and find a mentor, because it will open up your world to a lot of career opportunities and personal opportunities too.
Amazing. Patty, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you. Everyone watching, take that first step. Thank you, Patty. We appreciate you.
Great.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeremy. Take
you.
care.